Standing in stark contrast to the modern city of Cairo is the Giza Plateau. Its vast funerary complex would include both the pyramids of the pharaohs Khufu and his son Khafre. They were colossal monuments to the power of their builders, but they were also signposts to the end of an era. After nearly 200 years of building larger and larger pyramids, the last pharaoh to build at Giza would only manage to complete one that was scarcely one-third the size of its neighbors. One question continues to confound scholars, and that is, why? It was the year 2532 BC that ushered in the rule of the pharaoh Menkaure. He would become the fifth in a family line of rulers to inherit the throne during what was called the Fourth Dynasty. The son of the pharaoh Khafre, Menkaure probably inherited a kingdom where the colossal building projects of his grandfathers had tested the limits of royal authority. The 5th century BC historian Herodotus chronicled in Greek that for 106 years Egypt had been in great misery because its temples had been shut by Khufu and Khafre to make more time for work. Disapproving his father's deeds, Menkaure is said to have reopened the temples and let the people worship freely once more. The stone portraits that the pharaoh Menkaure had carved of himself are thought to symbolize his good nature. Here he stands alongside his favorite of 3 wives. She is Amenhotep. In an unusual display of humanity and compassion, she reaches out to hold him while her left hand rests comfortably on his arm. According to legend, Menkaure's benevolent rule was an affront to the gods. They had decreed that Egypt should be oppressed for 150 years, and the 2 kings before him knew this, but not he.
He was a good king, and he upset the gods because he was going against their prophecy. So they therefore said, in their revenge, if you like, right, we will just allow you to live for 6 years, and then we shall revert to the mayhem of the previous reigns. Well, Menkaure wasn't happy with this, and he decided that he would endeavour to cheat the gods. And the legends tell us that he called for the candles to be brought, and they were lit at night, so he lived night and day.
In this way, Menkaure reasoned he could rule twice as long each day and double his time from 6 years to 12 as the benign pharaoh of Egypt. The pharaoh Menkaure would in fact rule by candlelight for 28 years, until 2505 BC. He would build a relatively small pyramid, even though he had plenty of time on the throne to build a larger one. Scholars are left to ponder his reasons for this. Was it economic strain, or was the power of the pharaoh in doubt?
Menkaure's pyramid is the smallest of the 3 at Giza, and it is really hard to know why that's the case. His reign was not very long, but we know of pharaohs who had relatively short reigns who still built very large monuments. And I think the reason why there's this variation is not something spectacular like a weak pharaoh. I think that basically the scale was not so important as the monument itself.
Others speculate it was the pharaoh's choice of building materials that led to his decision.
We don't know why the Pyramid of Menkaure is the smallest of the 3 at Giza. It may have had to do with a desire to incorporate more hard-to-work stone. In other words, the lower part of his pyramid was certainly intended to be cased with granite, which is certainly harder to work and more difficult than limestone, which is the primary building material of all the rest of the pyramids. But there really is no answer to that question. There is no answer to the question of why Khufu's is the largest, or why Khafra's is precisely the size it is.
What is recorded is that the pharaoh Menkare's rule brought the end of the Fourth Dynasty. It ushered in a period of change and a new line of pharaohs that started a new dynasty. In 2498 BC, the fifth dynasty in ancient Egypt began with the reign of the pharaoh Userkaf. Userkaf, whose name meant "his soul is powerful," was the great-grandson of the pharaoh Khufu and ensured his kingship by marrying the daughter of the earlier pharaoh, Menkare. Userkaf's time on the throne was brief, long enough for him to reject the tradition of his predecessors who were buried in pyramids at the Giza Plateau and build his pyramid back in Saqqara. Now badly deteriorated, it stands almost in the shadow of the step pyramid of Djoser. The pharaoh Userkaf would also begin a religious cult that worshipped only the sun. The temple he built for this worship has long since been destroyed, but scholars have pieced together its description from the legacy of solar temples that would follow.
The Sun Temple of Userkaf, like the others, consisted of a benben or obelisk, the symbol of the sun, which sat on a podium, and in front of it was a large courtyard with an altar or offering place. And they seem to have undertaken offerings to the sun at that site. And these sun temples may have also been very closely connected with expressing the direct association of the king and the sun god, because in the afterlife, the king became directly associated with the sun god.
The fifth dynasty of Egyptian rulers would survive 150 years. Its final pharaoh was called Unas. He followed his immediate predecessors by also building at Saqqara. He named his pyramid the Pyramid which is Beautiful of Places. And while the outside of his pyramid has badly deteriorated, the interior still holds the first words written on the walls of pyramids. These were the pyramid texts. These hieroglyphs are a collection of spells designed to help the pharaoh Unas cross over into the afterlife. From words formed in stone, these instructions were collected by ancient scribes and written on papyrus. Meticulously illustrated, these writings became known as the Egyptian Book of the Dead. One of the most prized works of ancient Egyptian culture, this guidebook to the afterlife would be read and recited by the Egyptians for 2,000 years.
Hail Unas, his existence is for all eternity. Thy essence is in heaven, thy body on earth. The seat of the heart of Unas is among those who live upon this earth forever and ever and ever.
The fifth dynasty ended here, and with the demise of the pharaoh Unas in 2345 BC, there followed the sixth dynasty and a pharaoh whose name was Pepi. A small alabaster statue of Pepi reveals that, like earlier pharaohs, he would have the hawk god Horus associated with him. Here, however, the bird stands aloof and detached on the back of Pepi's throne. Interestingly, this most central of gods seems to be looking away from the pharaoh. Inscriptions from Pepi's reign record that Pepi's upper class was gaining wealth and becoming influential. His absolute rule from Memphis was becoming unstable. His kingdom was heading for disaster. This bronze statue of Pepi I depicts him in the twilight of his 50-year reign. When he died in 2283 BC, he would be succeeded to the throne by his son Pepi II, a boy only 6 years old. The new pharaoh was a boy named Pepi, after his father. At the age of 6, Pepi II was acknowledged as ruler of all of Egypt. But what practical leadership would a 6-year-old have to offer a growing country?
There were a few examples of pharaohs who came to the throne very young, such as Pepi II, who was probably only about 6 years old when he came to the throne. And what a 6-year-old pharaoh did was he did what he was told. You can bet that even though he was considered to be divine in nature and theoretically holding the supreme political power, there would be a council of advisors who would actually run the kingdom until he came of sufficient age to be really regarded as a pharaoh.
Still, the young pharaoh did wield influence. 2 years into his reign, during a trading expedition south to Aswan, word came back to the excitable 8-year-old King Pepi that a dancing pygmy had been captured to bring back to Egypt.
Come northward at once to the court. We must bring the dwarf alive, sound, and well, to rejoice and gladden the heart of the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. When he comes down with you into the ship, appoint reliable people who shall take care lest he should fall into the water. If you arrive at the court and the dwarf is with you alive and well, my majesty will make you many excellent honors.
Even a child pharaoh would be treated with enormous respect, and certainly any requests he had, people would try to put them into effect and would record them, because from their point of view, he is already manifesting the divine aspect of a pharaoh. And even though in the real world of politics, they're keeping a tight hold on things, in terms of his personal life, they're certainly going to interpret it as a manifestation of the divine aspect of rulership and to indulge him in what he wants.
During the childhood reign of Pepi II, at the end of the 6th dynasty, pharaonic authority disintegrated. There is evidence that various administrators declared themselves independent. From what written evidence we have, it appears a sort of feudalistic regime was established.
The nobles are full of misery, and the low classes are full of joy. Gold, lapis, silver, and turquoise hang on the necks of slave women, while ladies walk the streets wrapped in rags. He who once did not even possess sandals, today is the master of treasure.
Control moved away from Memphis. The king depleted his treasury, bestowing gifts on his nobles, and with the death of Pepi II in 2180 BC, the kingdom of Egypt collapsed. For more than 1,000 years, the desert-backed cliffs of the Nile Valley had given shelter and protection to the Egyptian civilization that had flourished here. By the year 2180 BC, the ancient Egyptians had brought about magnificent achievements in arts, science, and technology. This period, called the Old Kingdom in ancient Egypt, became the yardstick by which all later Egyptian achievement would be measured. Surrounded by natural splendor and man-made wonders, historians suggest that the Egyptians had become complacent. Now a process that had begun with the reign of Pepi II, the pharaoh who inherited Egypt's throne as a child, led to a breakdown of the country in 2184 BC. A period of transition followed that lasted 40 years and 4 dynasties. The precise reasons for this decline are unknown. The ancient writings are quiet about this shadowy period, save for a poem that has partially survived on papyrus.
See now, things are done that never were done before. The king has been robbed by beggars. See, one buried as a hawk is. What the pyramid hid is empty. See now, the land is deprived of kingship by a few people who ignore custom.
Records from the region of Heracleopolis show that a series of temporary kings ruled Lower Egypt from here, splitting the country into two lands again. Upper Egypt was controlled from the newly founded city of Thebes. The ancients described this period of instability as a time of 70 kings in 70 days. In fact, this period of chaos would last nearly 200 years. Out of the collapse of the Old Kingdom, there emerged the figure of a king again. This was Amenhotep, the first to reunify all of Egypt. Amenhotep referred to himself as uniter of the two lands, and the first part of his reign saw fighting and military campaigns aimed at crushing any cities that dared revolt against his rule.
Amenhotep I is really one of these very dynamic rulers of Egypt, really one of the greatest pharaohs, because he comes at a time when Egypt was divided internally, politically fragmented. And during his reign, he succeeded in reunifying Egypt and laying the groundwork for this period during which Egypt again becomes highly organized and centralized, and the kingship becomes very powerful.
The pharaoh Amenhotep ruled from Thebes, which was now the capital city, and a site that would one day be known for its temples of Karnak and Luxor. Even in Amenhotep's time, this was a large and powerful city. The ancients referred to it as the city of 1,000 gates. As a building project, it reflected the stability and prosperity that Egypt once again enjoyed under the pharaoh Amenhotep. But Amenhotep was not seen as a god-king like his predecessors had been during the time of the pyramids. To reflect this, he would erect a new style of mortuary temple for himself before an impressive backdrop of cliffs here in ancient Thebes, at a site named Dar el-Bahari. The complex was dug into the rock, a blend of traditional mastaba and pyramid of a god. This style of tomb building oddly confirms the power of Amenhotep's rule. He was a half-divine and half-mortal leader. Underneath the temple, a larger-than-life-size stone statue of the pharaoh Amenhotep was found. He is seated and depicted in his Hatshepsut robe, the robe he would have worn at the festival of his renewal. Nearby was uncovered an inscription of his queen named Kawit. Here she is depicted eternally having her hair arranged by a servant. Another artifact from the tomb depicts the princess Ashet relaxing as she enjoys the fragrance of a lotus blossom. Such scenes underline this period of peace and stability, a period that would continue under a pharaoh who would change the way Egypt viewed its rulers forever. By the year 1878 BC, this brooding, careworn figure would ascend to the throne of ancient Egypt. He was Sesostris III.
Sesostris III is really well known because of the large number of portrait statues which we have from him. They're very vivid.